about creating a culture of hospitality for an improved resident experience. We really want to focus on what messages or images your community is sending to your residents. How we're going to do that and the objectives we're going to complete today are, number one, understand how everything communicates through place, process, and people. Understand the difference between something we call a transaction versus an interaction. And then finally, we'll apply how everything communicates throughout the cycle of service. What things communicate? And what things, as you look around your community, what are you communicating? You see a list here of some things, whether they're verbal or nonverbal, things that are communicating, whether it's your website. If you're anything like me, you've traveled sometime throughout your life, whether that's for business or pleasure. And often, before making that reservation, you visit their website. And things that you're looking for from that website are maybe their photos, recent photos of things, of maybe their fitness center or the room itself, the view. You also may be looking for comments, ratings. What are people saying about that hotel? And not only what they're saying, but is it matching up to the photos? You've probably seen where a hotel is guilty of posting a photo that was 20 years ago, and the building looks nothing like it looks now. And you can tell that from the comment where, you know, great service, but you can tell the building is outdated. So are the photos on your website, are they matching up with truly how the building is now? Maybe you've had a build-on, an addition of a memory or assisted living or independent living to your community. Are you communicating that? So when they come to actually visit your community, are they seeing the things that they're seeing from your website? So website, what is your website communicating? Are you keeping it updated with current information? Of course, the interior and exterior of your building. Do you have cracks in your building? Are the sidewalks full of grass shavings? Unfortunately, if you have a neon sign out front, are your light bulbs out? We have a restaurant here that I've had the pleasure of visiting once or twice, and the food is absolutely incredible. However, I spend a lot of my time upselling their food for them because the outside of their building does not provide a very inviting experience to people. The windows are very dark. You can't see in, and so it gives an impression of what are they trying to hide in there? What don't they want me to see? So interior, exterior of your building, what are you communicating? And then all those verbal and nonverbals from your staff, the telephone conversations, your written communications. Everything you communicate creates some sort of experience. So we'll talk about how each one of these verbal and nonverbals can really improve or derail an experience. Everything communicates through place, and the place is really where the resident experiences service, or as a consumer, where you're experiencing some sort of service, whether that's a hotel stay or whether it's a restaurant, clothing store, wherever it is, you're experiencing some sort of service. And depending on what is being communicated through the place, exterior, interior, verbal, nonverbal, can really impact the resident's perception and the quality of their experience. If they see that the building is out of shape or the building needs some maintenance done to it, what kind of message is that sending to the resident of how they may experience the service once they're inside? Again, like the restaurant I just made note of, the service, the food quality is excellent, but unfortunately they're not providing that message from the look of their outside of their building. What messages are we communicating to our residents as far as place? The fact is, 80% of how we experience life is through emotions. We're we're emotional beings. We want to be have this touchy-feely feeling when we experience stuff. We want to go back. That's typically why we go back to places, because it made us feel good. So we want to experience it through our emotions. 20% of it is intellectual. It's the logistic part. Maybe we have to go out to eat because we're hungry. We don't feel like cooking. That's the logistical part. That's the intellectual saying, yep, drive yourself to the restaurant. You don't feel like cooking. You're going to have that need met there. If you're out of town, obviously the logistic part is that you have to stay in a hotel room. The residents, logisticals, they're a place in their life where they can no longer be at home. They've now had to come to your community to have that be their home. That's the logistic part. That's the stuff we can't necessarily control. But what we can control is the emotional side, and that we know that that's how they want to experience it. What better way to be in touch with our emotions than through our 5 senses? So if we know that our residents are experiencing life through their emotions, 80% of that experience is through their emotions. What are we doing to touch each one of those emotions? First one being sight. How many of you have some sort of photo album, and maybe that's moved to some sort of computer program on your computer that houses all your photos? But one way or the other, we're still taking pictures. We still have pictures. There's a picture here on this slide. Maybe you're using a picture of your family or of your wedding day or your best vacation, a scene, as your screensaver. And that's the first thing you see when you walk into your office and when you turn on your computer. Why do we do that? Why do we take pictures? Something in that picture created a memory. It stimulated our mind. It set the tone for how we were going to experience something or how we did experience something. We want to remember it. It gave us a good feeling. It got in touch with that 80% of how we experience life. Okay? We take pictures to remember events. Our sight is powerful. It sets the tone for us. It really holds true to that old adage of seeing is believing. What kind of things are we communicating through our sight? Are we creating good memories or memories that people want to forget? What is this communicating? Sorry, no reentry through the store. Residents must use trash room located next to north elevators. Sorry, residents, you now have been moved to use the trash room. Certainly sets a negative tone for our residents, for the guests of our community. A lot to be said, not only with the verbiage of this, but also the type of material we're using for the sign, paper signs. You didn't have the time to take to make some sort of plaque. It's now paper. We have a caution tape. Caution tape, to me, in of itself, it has a negative denotation. So certainly be careful of, I know we're trying to relay some sort of message, and we're trying to be cautious of that message. We're trying to keep the resident safety in mind, but again, it's how that message is being relayed to them. What are they seeing? Sound. What are the residents hearing? Are we sensitive to what they're hearing? A lot of background noise. Other people. Where is your concierge desk? And with that, is there a lot of traffic with outside vendors, with resident families, with residents of themselves? Is it hard for the residents to hear, whether they're on the phone or whether they're trying to talk to somebody up at the front? There's a lot of staff talking on their cell phones. Again, I was at a place of business and wanting to enjoy just a nice meal, and every time their front door opened, a ding-dong would sound. So every 2 minutes, ding-dong, ding-dong. That certainly wasn't very relaxing for me. So again, what are our residents hearing? What are they communicating? businesses don't have the ability to provide some sort of emotional effect versus on touch. But communities, restaurants, hotels, they are given the opportunity to make an emotional impact through touch. The linens on your tables in your dining room. The napkins, are they paper napkins or are they cloth napkins? In your bathrooms that are accessible to your residents, to your resident guests, are they cloth or are they paper napkins? Things of that nature. In most cases, especially at your communities, I assume a lot of the residents can bring in their own linens for bathing or for sleeping. But if we have guests of theirs that are sleeping in maybe a guest suite, what are our linens that we're providing to them? Are they scratchy? Are their bed linens not of the top thread? These are all things that we may not think about. But if we look at how those types of things are perceived, the value of those are seen as less than, and that can relate to how the residents feel about how we think of their value. Do we think of less value about them because of the things that we're giving them? What are you communicating through their touch? What are they feeling? Smell. Oh, smell. Smell can be such a fun thing. What are your residents smelling? I know every time I go to pick up my school from elementary school, I either get confronted with the smell of whatever they had for lunch that day or sweat socks. And I certainly try to get out of there as quickly as possible. I know, logistics say, I know I have to go pick them up because that's what I have to do. Is it in tune with my emotions? Not really. I want to get out of there as fast as I can. So smells plays a significant role in the service that we experience. I happened to do a training last week for a community that was right after the residents had their lunch. And the training happened to be in the dining room, and I thought, oh, we're going to be all influenced by the smells throughout the day, and some people are more sensitive to smells than others. However, the only thing that I could smell all throughout the training was a little Scentsy candle that they had provided that was giving off a very nice, fresh, outdoorsy smell. Inexpensive, but it definitely created an experience for me, and I kept referring to, gosh, it smells so good in here. So it really could have turned a bad experience if they really turned it into a good one for me. So are we doing that, providing that same message for your residents as well and for your residents' guests? Taste. Again, we have the opportunity to get in tune with our residents' taste in that sense. In each one of your communities, I assume you're providing some sort of dining option for them where you're cooking their food for them. If you think about reasons why you go out to eat, it's maybe out of convenience or maybe because you really had a great experience. The flavor of the food was excellent. I want to go back there. I'm going to recommend people to go there because the flavor met my expectations. So are we flavoring our food? Are we over-flavoring it? Temperature. I see a lot of, on the surveys, resident surveys, that temperature is often a concern. How are we addressing the needs of the temperature of your food? Consistency and texture. Again, remembering our audience, that sometimes residents have difficulty with the texture and consistency of their food. What messages are we providing through flavor, temperature, consistency, and texture as it relates to taste? Our five senses, sight, sound, touch, smell, and taste. Think about what your community communicates to your residents via these five senses. And knowing and understanding that it's 80% of how they're experiencing their day-to-day life is through those five senses. Our second P that we talked about is process. This is really where your resident experiences your service. So the first was really the place, where it gets more into their emotional effects. This is where they're experiencing the service through your process. And when we talk about process here, we're not necessarily talking about a process that you maybe have identified, step 1, step 2, step 3. It's more of how we are communicating or how we're touching each one of our residents through everything that we do, everything that your staff does. Take, for example, a housekeeper. They have some sort of job description that they're giving maybe at their beginning of their employment that outlines the jobs that they need to do, whether it's make a bed or clean a bathroom, vacuum floors. So there's some sort of job, but where it's critical is these touch points with each one of those jobs. For example, the housekeeper going in to vacuum the floor, that first touch point, how are they entering? Are they knocking on the door? What does that sound like? Remember, getting in touch with those 5 senses. Is it a loud, voiceful knock? Are they not even knocking at all and just walking into their place of home? Once they've stepped in, what is the resident seeing? Is my uniform untucked? Do I not have my name badge on so they can't identify that I work at the community? Do I have armpit stains on my clothing? My smell. Am I a smoker? And am I giving off the smell of a smoker? Or can you smell that I was just at a fast food restaurant? My overall attitude, my face expressions, all the things that, again, touch on their emotions. Touch. Maybe I've given them a gentle touch on their back. Hello, Mr. Wilson, how are you doing today? How can your staff, in each job that they do, how can they touch on each one of their emotions? Are we engaging the residents' 5 senses? As we talk about people, people is our last P, and people are what make the difference. Again, thinking back to the cycle of service that we discussed. While every moment is important when serving our residents, there are 2 times that are particularly important. And think about as you are gaining some sort of service yourself, it's really the first and the last impressions. Okay? First impressions are so important. You never get a second chance to make a good first impression. The first impressions really set the tone for the rest of your interaction with that resident. So making sure that your first impressions are engaging some sort of their 5 senses. It's been said that the first impressions last. It's what people remember longer than any of the other experience. What do our first impressions look like? Again, engaging that sight, engaging our senses, our smell, our posture, grooming, our condition of our clothing, and our overall attitude. I walked into a hotel last week and I greeted one of their housekeepers and I said, "Hey, how was your day?" And he said, "Spectacular." And that immediately led me to believe that I was going to have a great experience at this hotel. That one person, just by the one thing that he said, led me to believe that I was going to have a positive experience there. Versus, have you ever experienced being at the grocery store and trying to engage in a conversation and said, "Hey, how are you today?" "Oh, I can't wait. I'm almost done in 15 minutes and I can't wait to get out of here." That immediately leads me to believe that, gosh, I'm a burden to this person. I'm stopping them from leaving out the door. Okay, that's my first impression. What are your staff members, what kind of first impressions are they giving? How can we enhance those first impressions? Are we making eye contact? Smiling? Are we alert and ready to help? How is our work environment? If we have a station, whether that's a med station or a cleaning cart, how does that look? What kind of message is that giving off? Is it giving off that I'm not very detail-oriented or I'm not a very good communicator, which I may be, but my work environment may say differently? Are we waiting for the resident to approach us, or are we approaching them? Are we waiting, anticipating their next move and being proactive? Again, because I travel so much, I was at a place of business where I happened to be dying of thirst that night, and I wanted a Diet Coke so very bad. I needed some sort of sugar. And a lot of hotels have gone to a pantry setting, so I thought, well, I'll just go to the pantry and I'll get a Diet Coke. So I went to the concierge and I said, can you tell me where your pantry is? And they said, oh, unfortunately, we have vending machines is all. I said, okay, that's no problem. All I have is a debit card. I don't have any cash, but that's okay. And the concierge said, wait here just a minute, and I'll be right back. Well, what they had done is they had offered the assistance of somebody that worked at the hotel. They went, used their money, and got me a Diet Coke. That made a lasting impression on myself. They waited for me, didn't have to wait for me to ask. They definitely went above and beyond my request, making first impressions. Last impressions. Why are last impressions so important? Well, as you know, they really seal the deal. They really wrap up the entire experience and solidifies to the resident its place in the resident's memory. So are we making a good last impression? First impression kind of sets the tone. It's the first thing they see. What happens in between, those touch points through the cycle of service, validates whether that first impression was correct. And then the last impression, as I said, really solidifies the relationship. And it begins the anticipation of the return of that resident or that potential resident. Are they going to return? Did we give them a good lasting impression? Did we provide them a good experience? Again, ways to enhance the last impression. Using their name, and maybe we know what that preference is. Is it Mr. or Mrs.? Is it Doctor? Whatever it may be, are we using their name? Thanking them. Gosh, seems like such an easy thing, but we're real good at welcoming, but not as good as thanking. So thanking you for your business. We appreciate your business. We can't wait. We look forward to you coming back. Positive attitude, welcoming them back, offer further assistance. Okay? How are we enhancing the resident's last impression? First and last impressions, along with the 5 senses. How are we engaging the resident's emotions? Transaction versus interactions. Transactions are really your basic interactions. They kind of feel like you don't really care about the resident. Resident feels like the employee only cares about their paycheck. I'm just here to collect my money. I could really care less about what I'm doing, but I can't wait to get out of here as fast as possible. Okay? You're not treating them special. It's just your basic interactions. As that picture indicated before, it's really mechanical. You're providing something, they're providing something back to you, and that's it. There's no open dialogue, there's no conversations, it's exactly just a transaction. Again, as I'm traveling, I had to park in a parking garage, and as I left, I had to pay my fee for that ticket, for my parking ticket. I pulled up to the counter, gave the person my ticket, transaction. She gave me my statement, another transaction. I gave her my debit card, I signed it, I said thank you, she said nothing. That was a basic transaction. It was indifferent. There was no communication. It definitely left a bad, lasting impression on myself. Interactions. They are more relationship building. Okay? They are more conversational. You're engaging. You're having conversations. Having conversations with the residents. How do we find out about the residents? We have to have conversations with them. How do we show empathy? We have to have conversations. We're providing them a sense of belonging, and we're making it more of an investment. It's not as quickly as possible as we can remove ourselves from the situation. We're making an investment into this relationship. So each interaction is in the hands of yourself as managers, maybe directors, supervisors, as well as in the hands of your employees. They're here because you know how to make a difference on your residents. You know what your residents prefer. but by providing more interactions versus transactions, you're building relationships. You're making lasting impressions. Transactions versus interactions. In closing, questions to ask yourself as you review this information. How does your community communicate to the resident via place, process, and people? What are you doing well? What could you be doing better? What's the ideal? Place, process, and people. Keeping in mind 80% of how we go through and how we view events, experience life is through our emotions. How are we training and reinforcing this to our employees? What are we doing to make sure that they understand this concept as well? That from everything from how they smell, look, what the residents are hearing, what they're talking about, all makes an impact of the services that they're providing. Do they see it just as a service, or are they engaging their residents' five senses? Do you have a checklist, and do you do walkthroughs regularly? You know, how often do you walk around your building? How often do you walk around the department and see, are there things that need to be updated? Does your website need to be updated? All things to keep in mind and help impact whether or not a resident experience will be good or bad. In conclusion, little details can make a big difference, and things that we often see as, oh, we'll get to that later. But knowing that everything the customer sees, feels, hears, smells, tastes, and experiences with you creates impressions, which then create memory. So I hope today I've created some sort of memory, and that you will pay attention to the residents' five senses and help engage those five senses. I appreciate your time. We'll now open it for any questions or comments you may have. Okay, thank you very much. Please feel free to direct any questions or comments you may have as you think about things later on to the website, www.seniorlivingleadership.com, or to my email address noted on the webinar. Thank you again for your time. Have a wonderful afternoon, and take care.